So the fault appears when you insert your card or start the engine. It shows power steering fault and check ESP. The parking sensor fault is unrelated to this fault. So the Laguna GT models have a rear steering actuator shown in the picture. This is connected to two tie rods on the back wheels. So when the front wheels turn, it sends an electronic signal to the steering actuator, which then moves left and right and controls the back wheels. This helps the car turn in small circles easier. However, when the power steering fault shows up on the dash, the wheels can go out of line and the fault will need repairing and the actuator will need replacing. To start with, reverse the car onto ramps to gain access to the underneath of the vehicle. Here you can see the rear steering actuator located at the side of the fuel tank. It's exposed to the weather and the water from the roads, and as you can see, it's heavily corroded. The actuator itself is held in by two bolts, one at either side. This is an 18mm and this is also an 18mm socket. There's then a plastic cover which just clips off and pulls away. The only thing attaching the actuator to the vehicle now is a wiring harness that runs up and above the fuel tank to the electronic controller. I'll show you later in the video how you can access this by dropping the fuel tank slightly and lowering the back box of the exhaust. I will now remove the actuator. I decided first to try my impact gun to loosen each of the bolts using an 18mm impact socket, making sure that each bolt was soaked with penetrating fluid beforehand. Each of the bolts is held by an 18mm nut on the top. Once you have loosened each of these, you will need to hold the top nut with a spanner. Access to the top nut is restricted and it is difficult to get a spanner above the actuator. This is the centre of the two bolts on the actuator. You can just about get an 18mm spanner on the top to hold it. This is the second bolt nearest the wheel. Access is extremely tight to get an 18mm spanner on the nut at the top. I tried with the impact gun with a small adjustable spanner on the top nut, but unfortunately access was too tight. In the end, I rolled the vehicle off the ramps and removed the rear driver's side wheel. Here you can easily access the top 18mm nut. Soak the thread with penetrating fluid and clean it as best you can. I then used an 18mm socket on an extendable ratchet underneath while holding the nut at the top. This is extremely tight. Take your time, do not round off the nut or the bolt head or you'll have some serious issues. In the end, I used a longer 18mm spanner and took my time undoing it by hand. This is the nut removed. Unfortunately, I didn't film the actual process of the nut coming off, but here you can see the amount of thread lock that was on the nut. It's been on there since the car was new, from 83,000 miles, for nearly 12 years. But very stubborn. Take your time, do not round off the bolt. I did this using a longer extendable ratchet underneath with an 18mm socket, and then on top I used a larger long box spanner to give me more grip and purchase. This was the position that I held the spanner whilst operating the ratchet underneath. It was very tight and took a lot of strength, but it can be done. Take your time. With both bolts removed, the only thing holding the actuator in place is the wiring harness that runs up above the fuel tank and towards the back box. In order to access this, disconnect the rear offside rubber mounts on the back box. This will drop the exhaust enough to gain access above to the control unit where the two wires clip in. You can just see through where they're connected at the rear. You can reach in and unplug both the connectors, and now there's nothing holding the actuator to the car. It's just a case of carefully lowering the actuator out from underneath and then feeding the wiring harness from above the fuel tank and out underneath the car. The actuator is held on by the wiring harness that's catching underneath, so I fed it through from the other side to pull it out. And there you have one old rusty rear steering actuator removed from the car. Okay, so on the bench, this is the part, it's the old one. Now, actually you can see this bearing, well, it's not a bearing, is it? Bush, sorry. It's quite loose. I'm assuming when the front wheels are turned, this moves up and down to actuate the rear trap rod ends to turn the rear wheels. It feels solid apart from that bush. I mean, it looks in a bad way, doesn't it? This is a nice, well, it's not new, refurbished from the Ukraine. Part number for this 521530001R. And the bush on this. It's got movement, but it's a lot stiffer. So it could just be something simple as pressing out a bush and putting a new bush in. if you've got one made to order for that size. So I'll fit this. The only thing I do notice is that this has got a grounding wire on it, whereas the other one didn't. So I'll have to try and find somewhere to ground this maybe. Obviously the other one didn't need it, so not sure why this one does. We'll work it out. Okay, we're getting there. New clips in, and I've just put the ground wire on that bolt on the carrier. So put everything back together and we should be good. And here is the new or reconditioned rear steering actuator fitted. So the rear steering actuator has been fitted. Start the car up. Still got the parking sensor fault, but I think they just need cleaning. But the power steering fault has gone. So if you've got a Laguna GT or Coupe GT version with the 4-wheel steering and you're getting the power steering fault, then it's more than likely going to be your rear steering actuator. When the front wheels turn, the back wheels turn the opposite way at slow speeds, and when it gets really bad, your steering wheel can be out of sync. So because you've just done a turn and the fault's on, your rear wheels can be stuck outwards, and in order to drive straight you've got to drive with your steering wheel like that, which is obviously bad for your tyres. If that happens, you can usually stop the car, turn the engine off, take the key out and restart it, and it gets rid of it. But when it gets to that stage, you know that it needs fixing. For me, this fault was intermittent for about 6 to 9 months, and it got worse. The part is quite hard to get hold of. I ordered it from the Ukraine. I'll post a link in the description below. Thank you.